Let's dive into one of the most famous, and let's be honest, one of the most challenging passages in the entire New Testament. It's a couple of verses that, for a lot of people, have really defined the whole idea of salvation and damnation.
You've heard this before, right? It's often held up as the final word, a stark, black and white choice between heaven for just a few and destruction for, well, pretty much everyone else. It's been used to paint this picture of a God who ends up saving only a tiny fraction of humanity.
But what if that's not a final verdict on the afterlife at all? What if we've been missing some absolutely crucial clues in the original language? We're going to look at three of them, and they completely reframe this whole passage. They shift it from being about your eternal destiny to being an urgent observation about life, right here and right now. Okay, our first clue. It might seem like a tiny grammatical detail, but trust me, it's a game changer. It's all about timing. So in the original Greek, the verbs here are in the present tense. Now, it sounds a little clunky in English, but a more literal translation is the road that is leading to destruction. See the difference? It's not about a road that will lead somewhere way off in the future. It's about a road that is leading somewhere in this very moment. It's an ongoing action. This changes everything. Jesus isn't acting like a judge describing a future permanent outcome. He's more like an observer on the ground, describing the paths he sees people walking down, right then and there. It pulls the whole conversation out of the distant future and into the immediate present. And that brings us right to our second clue, which just builds on that first one. It all boils down to one critical word: destruction. Now, when we hear that word, our minds immediately jump to, annihilation, eternal punishment, something final. But that's really not what the original language gets at. The Greek word that's used here is Apolumi, and its meaning is way more nuanced than just, poof, you cease to exist. It really points to a state of being lost or ruined, not necessarily obliterated forever. And here's the best part. We don't have to guess what Jesus meant by Apolumi. He basically tells us himself in some of his most famous stories, using this exact same word. Just think about the parables in Luke 15. You've got the lost sheep, the lost coin, the prodigal son. In the original Greek, all three are described as being in a state of apolumi. They are destroyed. But wait a minute. Are they gone forever? Do they cease to exist? No way. And more importantly, what's the entire point of each story? The thing that was destroyed is searched for, it's found, and its restoration is the cause for a huge celebration. Now, here's a fascinating twist. Some theologians who actually argue for eternal conscious torment have used this point to make their case. They'll say, see, apolumi doesn't mean you're annihilated. It means you exist in a state of ruin. And they do that to justify an eternal existence in misery. But that exact same logic perfectly supports the idea of eventual restoration. So this is so important. In a biblical context, destruction is a condition, not a final, irreversible sentence. It's a state of being separated from where you belong, a state from which recovery isn't just possible. It's the whole point of the story. Okay, for our final clue, we just have to zoom out. We can't just pluck these two verses out of their context and treat them like a standalone fortune cookie. We have to look at the entire sermon Jesus was giving, which covers 3 whole chapters in the book of Matthew. A lot of modern Christianity has framed this whole passage in the context of the afterlife. What happens when you die? But when you really look at the source material, that seems to be a fundamental misreading. Jesus' focus was way more immediate, way more grounded. So the life and the destruction Jesus is talking about, they're paths you can walk down in this life. The broad road of selfishness, of greed, of violence, yeah, that leads to a ruined, wasted life now. And the narrow path of love, of forgiveness, of humility, that leads to a true, abundant, beautiful life, also now. So when we put all these clues together, the present tense, the real meaning of destruction, and the immediate context of the kingdom of God on earth, the whole passage just transforms. It's no longer this final, terrifying verdict. It becomes something else entirely. Let's recap what we've seen. First, the verbs are in the present tense, talking about a journey that's happening now. Second, that scary word destruction, apolumi, actually means a state of being lost that can be restored. And third, the whole context is about living in the kingdom of God right here on earth. So what this becomes is an urgent warning, not a final decree. Jesus is making this really serious, sober observation. He's basically saying, hey, look around. The path of selfishness and dehumanizing others, that path is easy and it's crowded, and it's leading to a ruined, broken life. He's pleading with his listeners to choose the harder, less traveled road that leads to real life, here and now. Now, reframing it like this doesn't take away the seriousness of the warning one bit. That path to a ruined life is real, and it's devastating. But it centers the entire message, not on a final hopeless verdict for the majority, but on this relentless restorative hope. The hope that even those who are lost can be and ultimately will be found.